Hey, what's up, guys? Wanted to talk with you really briefly here about one of those things in baseball that I think, for the most part, only replayers really understand and care about. That thing is called outs. So usually when we're talking about baseball statistics, people want to focus on runs. They want to focus on hits. They want to focus on types of base hits and on ways to measure one player's type of base hits against another and all of this other stuff. But the truth is that when we really look at the game of baseball and how it's played, it's the outs that are more important than the hits. This is especially important when you're playing with a dead ball era season, or a season in which there were at least ostensibly, presumably, a lot of outs that were made on the base paths. This is sort of the thing that makes baseball flow, right? So you get a lot of people who talk about, oh, baseball is a sport with no clock. It's not really true. Baseball has a clock. The clock is the number of outs. In fact, you can see that if you read accounts of old games that were played in the rain or right before darkness fell or something. Sometimes if you're wondering if the game's going to get to that 4.5 innings or whatever you need for the home team to be able to win, or the full 5 innings, sometimes the team that has the ball will stall and will make really, really poor decisions, or will sort of serve the ball up there as slow as possible to allow the other team to hit it, in the hope that the other team will not make outs. The team that wants to speed the game up because they want it to be an official one will then make outs as quickly as possible. It's a hard thing for us to imagine these days because it doesn't really happen that often. But if you do a lot of research into the history of the game, you will see this happen, especially if you're looking at pre-World War I seasons, right? This was a big strategy. It was definitely part of the game, and it kind of goes to show you that the actual currency of baseball is not runs, it's outs. Now, there are a lot of implications for us when we talk about this stuff, right? I am fully aware that most of the sabermetric world of baseball is based on the notion that runs are the currency of baseball. I mean, if you go look up the explanation of, I was about to say win shares. I think it's similar for win shares, but if you look up the explanation of WAR, the other W, what you'll find is that they talk about WAR being expressed as in terms of wins that come from runs. And the basic things that people try to figure out are how many runs did you cost the team, how many runs did you deliver for the team, and so on and so forth. Well, if you play a lot of these games, you know that that's not really the thing that matters. The thing that matters the most is outs. If you're playing with a baseball simulator, it doesn't matter if it's a computer game or a board game, and you're missing a lot of outs in a certain category, you're going to figure it out. I've talked about this before with this 1949 replay. You haven't read my article about it yet because it's not going to come out till I don't even know when it comes out, probably late May. But the problem that we're seeing with this replay is that there are too many double plays, as in the Philadelphia Athletics are on pace not just to hit 217 double plays as a team, they're closer to hitting 300. Right. In fact, I would say almost half of the teams, if you combine the two leagues together, are going to be close to breaking that record of 217 double plays by a team in a single season. This is a problem. This tells me that there are too many double plays. And if that is imbalanced, in other words, if there are not too many double plays to compensate for not enough runners thrown out on the base pass, but if rather there are too many double plays because of some error in the game engine, which is what I suspect, then we really have a problem. What that means is that you won't have enough runners on base. You can get your base hits right, you can get the slugging percentage right, you can get all of the basic stats of baseball right, and get the walks right, which it looks like Diamond Mine is doing, and still have runs scored off because you had too many double plays, right? Now you see how important outs are. For other games, the big important thing is not necessarily double plays. It might be caught stealing. If you play a lot of APBAs, especially the APBA basic game, this is absolutely obvious and is very, very manifest. Without those caught stealing outs, you have a problem, right? If a guy is not going to be caught stealing when he's on base, that out has to come from somewhere. And what might happen is you might end up with teams that run a little bit hot because Ricky Henderson, instead of being caught, I don't remember in 1982 how many times he was caught, let's say 40 times or something, he ends up being caught maybe once because of a board aberration and still steals 130 bases. That's going to create a completely different sort of run-scoring environment for the Oakland Athletics, and that can really skew your statistics. This is why outs are so vital and they are so important. Now, the reason why it's important to talk about this when we're talking outside of just the simulator world and we're talking about actual sabermetrics and baseball analysis is because we have a hard time in the sabermetrics world dealing with fielding. One of the reasons why we have a hard time dealing with fielding is because people keep talking about fielding in terms of run prevention. That is not the goal of the fielder. It's not the goal of the pitcher. The goal of the pitcher and the goal of the fielder is the same. They want to get the guy out. It doesn't matter to you if the guy standing next to you got the out or if you got it, right? There's a big thing going on. I haven't dug into this yet. There's a big thing that was going on Twitter about a month ago or so where we were talking about Dante Bichette. Dante Bichette, who had a good offensive year in 1999, he played in Coors Field. He was playing for the Rockies, so yeah, we can discount that a little bit, but his wins above replacement is discounted heavily and is very, very low because of the big hit that he takes for being not just a left fielder, but apparently an incompetent left fielder. Now, I haven't looked closely at this. It might be the case, it might not be. But if it's possible that Bichette had fewer putouts in left field because he had a center fielder who was taking all the putouts, there's no reason to hold that against Dante Bichette. His purpose is not to get stats. His purpose is to help the team get outs, right? This is something that we need to talk about and we need to take into consideration, guys, because I mean, the mainstream sabermetricians who are pushing this stuff and who are talking about this clearly are not thinking in these terms, and it's a problem. Right? The same problem is manifest when we're talking about defensive independent pitching statistics or fielding independent pitching, depending on who you're talking to, right? I don't know Tom Tango personally. I've read his stuff off and on. I've got his book, right? I remember reading when he was posting on Baseball Primer back in the good old days. But what I'll tell you about this is that there's a mistake behind the idea of fielding independent pitching. And that mistake, is the idea that pitchers are completely independent of the fielders. It's not true. It's not true at all. They have the same goal. They're trying to do the same thing. There's no reason why a pitcher should try for a strikeout instead of trying to get the guy to hit the ball. In fact, if you know your baseball history and if you know how the great managers of the past taught, most of them would try to teach their pitchers to pitch to contact instead of trying to blow the ball by everybody and get a bunch of strikeouts, right? There are arguments about whether one thing is better than the other. I know what Bill James said about it. I know that there's this feeling that contact pitchers never had career longevity and would always get injured or whatever. I would tell you that's probably based on a low sample size and a little bit of picking and choosing. But the real problem that we have here is a basic conceptual problem. Pitching is part of defense, and you understand that when you realize that they're all concerned with outs. To a pitcher, it doesn't matter how the out is made. What matters is that the out is made. If you know how the game is played, you know that the second baseman and the shortstop especially probably need to know what pitch is coming so they know which way to shade the batter. You know that the center fielder and the outfielders also would kind of like to have an idea of where the pitch is shaded. If they're doing their job right, they want to be able to know if they need to shade a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. Right? I've seen many, many clips of good third basemen playing, where they're able to run in a little bit and able to anticipate that the ball will be hit right at them because of what kind of pitch it is, and they're able to snag a line drive that otherwise has double written all over it, right? This doesn't happen every single time. I know that the plural of anecdote is not data, but I also know that if you talk with people who've actually played baseball at any level from really Little League or Babe Ruth League on up, they know that this stuff is important and that it is a team sport. Even if we talk about strikeouts, right, which we think of as just the pitcher's actions, it's not. The pitcher takes the sign from the catcher and he pitches the ball that the catcher asks him to pitch. They need to be on the same page so that we don't have a passed ball or a wild pitch or something crazy happening. It's not independent of defense. None of that is independent of defense. And when you realize that the goal of the pitcher is not to get a strikeout or to even prevent a run, is simply to record more outs, you'll understand the way that the game should be played. Christy Mathewson was right when he talked about pitching, and he was talking about, finding guys you can let up on and not throwing a million miles an hour out there every time so you can pace yourself. He was absolutely right, and it's a lesson that people need to learn about today. What does this all have to do with baseball simulators? Well, I'll tell you, it's important to pay attention to outs and to how outs are generated and to make sure that you're getting the right number of outs generated in your game. If you're having a hard time, if things seem off, it might be the hitter cards. Yeah, it might be however hitting is calculated. But I guarantee you the problem probably will come down to outs, not having enough outs, not having good out distribution, or having too much of other results that get in the way of those outs. A little bit of school for thought, and there are a couple of these threads that we can pick up a little bit more as we move along. Love to know what you think about it, but I'll tell you, when you played full replays, you know what I'm talking about. Those outs are pretty important, and we got to pay attention to them. And I would say as well that when we sit down and we do some really in-depth analysis of a game, when we're looking at how the game is made, we don't want to start with the hits. What we want to start off with is the outs. What is the mechanism that we're using? How is this determined? And how are out results distributed among players? Food for thought, guys. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.